talking about. It's great. Great
Yeah, no,
point.
it's interesting to me because when you say this, it takes me back to like sometimes I ask myself, I'm like, how did I end up in this seat? Like,
Hmm.
why am I not still working in consulting or working in tech? And how did I end up like doing this work? Um, and it takes me back to about 2006 when I was in college and I took a behavioral economics class. And
Mm.
it was like one of the most interesting, I was an econ major, and it was one of the most interesting classes to me because I got introduced to like the idea that like we might think that we're rational and yet at the same time like we are doing all these irrational things, right? There's a
Right.
wonderful book I think by Dan Ariely called Predictably Irrational, and it talks about like these things that we think that we're in choice around, but there's actually a lot more other factors that are taking place. And it got me
Hmm.
curious about like why do humans make the choices that they do? Like why do we have the behaviors that we do? And then most importantly for me, I'm like how do I get either the motivation or how do I actually execute against what it is that like I feel? Because when you were describing like you know what to do, but not necessarily how to do it, I'm like, oh, do I feel you on that?
Hmm.
And around me, lots of things get done, you know,
Yeah.
but it's there's something in what you're describing that almost feels like my stance in the world, which is like there's a way that it works for you. Let
Hmm.
us let us find that, let us see it, let's celebrate it, and let's value it. There's like
Yes.
no like if you can do that and capture that and translate that out into the world, you can there are people who will benefit from your process and the way that you do it, you know.
Well, but so here's what's so key to that. There's so many things. I
Yeah,
want to go back
please.
to motivation. I want to talk about ambiguity, but on that last piece, what's really key, part of the challenge in the neurodiversity world is when the coaching world or the consulting world says, here's how you do something. Great. This works for me. This is going to work for you. And when you have neurodiversity, just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for me, or vice versa. And so the really most important thing to supporting people with neurodiversity is to help them figure out what their process is and not to just give them a process and say, okay, this process works, use it. The typical example I use all the time is when you give a whole bunch of kids in a class, you give the entire school a planner. That's great for 60, 70% of the kids for whom a planner works, but it stinks for the 30 to 40% of the kids in the school for whom a planner is not their best vehicle for capturing assignments and knowing what's expected of them and by when. Now, I know most of us would say, well, but it's a calendar and it's a structure and it works. And it does for 60 to 70% of the kids. And so what's so key here is to really personalize and individualize and to help people figure out what their process is instead of just saying, here's a process, you should use it. As parenting, in the realm of parenting, this becomes really challenging because parents see what the kids should do or need to do. He just needs to do this, which is how the parent would do it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to work for their kid. So understanding what does work, what doesn't work, what shuts them down becomes a key factor to helping people develop the processes and systems that will work